Welcome to this presentation on winter overseeding. Warm season turf grasses, and more specifically Bermuda grass, will often go dormant once cool temperatures of late fall and winter arrive. Shown here is a Bermuda grass fairway that has gone into winter dormancy. This picture was taken around Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. In some cases, to counteract this look, the Bermuda grass is overseeded with a cool season turf grass in the fall to give the golf course color. This photograph is from TPC Scottsdale in Arizona, which shows a contrast between the dormant Bermuda grass in the background and the effect of overseeding the tee and the greens complex on this par 3. This photograph is from the Hilton Head area in South Carolina. Notice the tees and the fairway where overseeded has occurred in contrast to the non-overseeded rough. In some cases, the golf course may be overseeded wall to wall. This is Augusta National Golf Club in Augusta, Georgia, where they overseeded all the turf areas that are Bermuda grass, except for the putting greens, which happen to be creeping bent grass. Winter overseeding is popular on resort courses, with some combination of tees, greens, fairways, and roughs being overseeded. Public and private clubs may overseed greens and tees, but fairways are often optional. Actually, an increasing number of golf courses are using green colorants or painting their golf course to look green, which is the case here. The process for preparing to overseed can vary from golf course to golf course and superintendent to superintendent, while other factors such as tournaments or events may influence the process. There is no one right way, and as a disclaimer, the mention of products is in no way an endorsement by The Ohio State University or myself. Products used should follow the manufacturer's label, and I use them primarily in this presentation as an example, specifically for weed control. For your information, this is a golf course in Dubai that has just been recently overseeded. This picture was taken in November. As background, the predominant Bermuda grass variety used on golf course fairways is Fairway 419. This picture was taken approximately 5 days prior to overseeding. Prior to overseeding, the goal is to provide as healthy a Bermuda grass turf going into the fall and winter as possible. Proper fertilization, thatch, and pest control are integral parts. In addition, preparation for overseeding fairways may require the application of a pre-emergent herbicide, like Barricade. If the fairway is to be overseeded, the application is made approximately 6 to 8 weeks prior to overseeding. This herbicide is not labeled for greens. The major weed concern is Poa annua. The goal is to suppress Poa annua germination long enough that the overseeded turfgrass gets established, allowing it to outcompete the germinating Poa annua. A relatively new group of herbicides, the sulfonylureas, can be applied to Bermuda grass greens, and fairways too. This is one example that's commonly used, which is called rimsulfuron, which may be applied 5 days prior to overseeding. Again, always follow labeled directions. The growth regulator Primo is often applied 2 days prior to overseeding. The purpose is to slow the Bermuda grass down, making it less competitive against the overseeded seedlings, and also to reduce the likelihood of frequency of mowing during the overseeding process and establishment. Except for weed control applications, minimal mechanical preparation is done to Bermuda grass fairways in anticipation of the overseeding. Some verticutting may be done to open the turf and provide for better seed-soil contact, but the process is fairly non-invasive. The seeding rate for fairways is approximately 400 pounds of perennial ryegrass per acre. It may vary depending on the situation, but the idea is to seed at a rate that gives the turf the green look, but a healthy Bermuda grass base provides a desirable playing surface. This photograph shows a fairway being overseeded. Along the outer edge of this fairway is being overseeded with a drop spreader. A few golf courses may contract out this process, that literally using an air compressor blows air down, forcing the seed down into the canopy. Where golf courses overseed their rough, they're usually seeding at a rate half that of the fairways. The perennial ryegrass will begin to come up within 7 to 10 days, and ideally the transition from Bermuda grass to ryegrass is not too obvious. Preparation for overseeding Bermuda grass greens, here specifically ultra-dwarf greens, is a little more intense than fairways. Prior to overseeding, the greens are often verticut in multiple directions. Ultra-dwarf greens are overseeded often with Poa trivialis instead of perennial ryegrass. Why? The density of the ultra-dwarfs is so high that the perennial ryegrass seeds are often too big to move down into the canopy. Poa trivialis, or rough bluegrass, is commonly used because of its fine texture, small seed, and relatively rapid germination. Poa trivialis is not used on cool season golf courses in the north because it's extremely sensitive to heat stress. Seeding is done in multiple directions to get uniform coverage. Uniform coverage is important because misses or overlapping of seed can produce some interesting mistakes. For example, in this case, the staff member forgot to turn off the spreader when he turns the spreader on this tee, resulting in a scallop pattern. After seeding, the greens are top-dressed and lightly rolled to promote seed-soil contact. Once seeded, providing fertilizer and water is critical in establishing the overseeded turf. Seedlings often appear in 7 to 10 days. If timed correctly, the conversion to cool season turf is hardly noticeable. Here you can see the Bermuda grass fairway is slightly going off color with the cooler temperatures of fall, while the overseeded apron and green are showing the seedling color. Mowing begins as soon as possible, usually within 10 days of overseeding. If done correctly, the course makes a nice transition from the Bermuda grass, which is going dormant, to a golf course that is ready for winter play. This slide summarizes the overseeding process. Just a few comments. Generally 4 to 6 weeks out from overseeding, cultural practices are geared to slow down Bermuda grass growth. And the second thing I have not mentioned is when do you seed? That varies to some extent on non-agronomic factors like golf tournaments and such, but generally the date to overseed is 4 to 6 weeks prior to frost or when soil temperatures reach an average around 72 degrees Fahrenheit. So far we've covered the fall aspects of winter overseeding. However, we only have covered half of the process. In the spring, a transition needs to occur back to Bermuda grass. You can start to see here in this picture where the grain is slightly brown. This is where the cool season turf grass is beginning to die in the spring. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that it was important to have a healthy Bermuda grass going into the winter overseeding. On this screen, the Bermuda grass was not healthy. As the overseeded grass begins to die in the spring, the Bermuda grass, which should be greening up and coming in, is brown or dormant. It is not greening up and is actually dead. The process of spring transition is for future discussion, and most likely for another class. This concludes this presentation on winter overseeding.